My son laughed when he left me beside a half-eaten elk carcass and said, "Meet Grizzly Bear." Then he tossed my pack into the mud, climbed back into his truck, and drove off with my phone, my bear spray, and the last easy road out of that stretch of Montana forest. My knees buckled so hard, my teeth clicked together. I didn't shout after him. I put one hand against the cold metal of the truck's old tailgate as it rolled away, reached into my shirt pocket, and touched the brass compass my wife had given me 23 years earlier. Then I did the small thing that ruined him. I kept his voice. At that moment, I still didn't understand why my own son wanted me scared, lost, or dead before sunset. I only knew the look on his face wasn't anger. It was calculation. And before that night was over, I was going to find out what he'd already put in motion. If you've ever learned too late what some people call family, stay with me, because the woods were the cleanest part of what they did. It didn't start in the forest. It started 3 weeks earlier, with orange survey ribbon tied to my late wife's blueberry fence. I found it just after sunrise, fluttering in the wind like somebody had marked a body. The fence ran along the east edge of my cabin property, where Rose used to kneel every July with a dented metal bowl hooked over one wrist, picking berries and humming through her teeth. That fence wasn't decorative. I built it the summer after her second round of chemo, when she said she was tired of rabbits eating the things she still had the strength to grow. So when I saw that ribbon tied there, and another one farther down by the cottonwoods, my stomach dropped. Luke told me not to worry. "Probably county fire mapping," he said when I called him. "Dad, not everything is a conspiracy." He said it in that soft, patient voice people use when they want credit for not sounding cruel. I remember standing at my kitchen sink while he said it, looking out at the porch Rose and I built by hand. The floorboards still dipped slightly near the third post because the first winter frost had shifted it before we poured deeper footings. I had offered to fix it a dozen times. Rose always said no. "Let the house show it's been through weather," she used to tell me. Luke had not spoken to me like a son in months. He spoke to me like a problem that needed management. That should have told me enough. It didn't. A few days after the ribbon showed up, a woman from an assisted living facility left me a voicemail. She said, "Mr. Bell, just confirming Saturday's cognitive intake consultation." I thought she had the wrong number. I called back and told her so. There was a little silence on the line. Papers shuffled. Then she said, "I apologize. This referral was submitted by family." I asked her what family. She hung up so fast, I just stood there staring at my phone. That night, Luke came by the cabin with his wife, Erica, carrying a bakery box from the expensive place in Bozeman that puts gold dust on fruit tarts, like fruit wasn't enough anymore. Erica kissed the air near my cheek. Not me. She never quite touched me if she could help it. She wore cream-colored boots, too delicate for gravel, and looked around my kitchen the way some women inspect public bathrooms. Luke acted warm. Too warm. He asked if I still kept the property papers in the hall desk. He asked whether I'd thought any more about simplifying. He asked if I ever got lonely out there alone. I told him no. Not while I still had work to do. That made Erica smile in the thin way she had when she thought I was being stubborn on purpose. "Henry," she said, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her sleeve, "this place is beautiful in a rustic way, but it isn't practical. One fall, one medical event, one winter storm, and then what? We just want what's best." What's best? I've learned to fear that phrase more than shouting. People say what's best when what they mean is what's easiest for them to live with. Luke walked through the cabin like a man pricing an estate sale. His eyes kept landing on things that mattered only if you were measuring square footage or resale. The wood stove Rose and I restored from a farm auction. The cedar chest at the foot of my bed. The old nail holes from the coat hooks where Luke used to hang dripping rain jackets when he was 9. That night, when he thought I was out back, covering the split wood pile, I came in through the mudroom and heard Erica speaking in a low voice near the hallway. "He can't sit on that parcel forever," she said. "If he won't sign voluntarily, then we stop pretending this is a choice." Luke answered so quietly, I only caught the tail end. "Once capacity is established, it moves fast." I froze with my hand still on the doorframe. Capacity. That word stayed with me. When they noticed me, Erica changed expression so quickly, it was almost beautiful. She picked up her wine glass and asked whether I still had the blue wool blanket Rose used to keep on the porch swing, like we had been talking about throw pillows and weather. I didn't mention what I heard. Not because I was afraid of them, because I was still doing what parents do long after their children stop deserving it. I was trying to find an innocent explanation before I accepted the ugly one. The truth is, I had spent most of Luke's life making excuses for the parts of him that looked too much like hunger. When his first business collapsed, I emptied almost half my retirement to keep collectors from dragging him through court. When he and Erica bought that white stone house outside town with a kitchen the size of my first apartment, I paid for the new roof after hail damage because Luke said insurance was delayed and they were cash tight. I built the nursery bookshelves with my own hands. I installed their ceiling fans. I watched their dog for 3 months when Erica decided the barking affected her sleep. And every time Rose gave me that look from across the room, the one that said, "Be careful not to confuse helping with being used," I told her what fathers tell themselves when love gets expensive. He's under pressure. He'll remember. Rose has been gone 5 years now, and the thing grief gives you, if you survive it long enough, is a terrible clarity. You start seeing where people were standing all along, but that wasn't the part that broke me. The part that broke me was the camping invitation. Luke hadn't asked me to go anywhere alone with him since before Rose got sick. We used to camp every fall when he was young, just the two of us. He'd ride in the truck with his feet tucked up on the bench seat, eating peanut butter crackers and asking if bears could smell toothpaste through metal. I taught him how to read a ridgeline, how to follow water downhill, how to sleep with dry socks in the bottom of the bag so morning didn't feel like punishment. So when he called and said, "Dad, let's do one night out, just us. Clear the air," something soft and stupid in me lifted its head. I should tell you this plainly. Hope has embarrassed me more than once. He said he'd found a quiet, dispersed site near the Gallatin Range. He said he missed how things used to be. He even said, "Mom would hate this distance between us." That line should have made me hang up. Instead, I stood in my bedroom, holding Rose's brass compass, the one she gave me on our 10th anniversary after I got us turned around in the Bitterroots and pretended I was simply taking the scenic route. She had it engraved on the back, "Find your way home." I slipped it into my shirt pocket, and because the whole invitation felt just slightly too polished, I also slipped a little digital voice recorder into the same pocket. I used it for measurement notes and grocery reminders, and lately for the odd sentence I didn't want to lose. After Rose died, I got into the habit of saving sounds: a kettle boiling, rain on the metal roof, my own voice saying, "Don't forget milk," as if evidence of an ordinary day might hold a person together. At the trail pullout, Luke was almost cheerful. He wore brand new hiking boots, with the price of them still somehow visible in the way he walked. He told me to leave my main phone in the truck so we could really unplug. He offered to carry the bear spray and first aid kit because, in his words, "No point loading your shoulders up." He even took my backpack and repacked it for me while I was relieving myself behind a stand of fur. When I came back, he zipped it shut and grinned. "Lighter. See? I'm useful." The air smelled like wet pine bark and old snowmelt. Somewhere uphill, a raven barked. I clicked the recorder on, inside my pocket. That was the first time I let myself admit I didn't trust my own son. The hike in was wrong from the start. Luke walked too fast, then slowed dramatically whenever he looked back, like he wanted me to feel old and be grateful he noticed. He kept steering us off the marked trail onto older logging cuts and game paths. Once, when I said, "This isn't the route to any site I know," he laughed and told me I was getting traditional in my old age. About 2 miles in, we passed fresh claw marks on a pine trunk and a pile of berry-heavy scat, so new the flies were still finding it. "Grizzly country," I said. Luke shrugged. "You taught me not to panic." I remember the exact color of the sky then. Thin silver cloud over a hard blue opening, the kind of afternoon that turns cold too fast when the sun slips. We reached a clearing near dusk I didn't recognize, with an old fire ring, a stretch of muddy ground, and the smell. You don't forget that smell if you've ever hunted, or cleaned game, or found something in the woods that died badly. Sweet rot, iron, open meat. I saw the elk carcass off to the right, half buried in brush, ribs exposed, one leg stripped white. I stopped walking. "Luke," I said, and my voice came out lower than I expected. "We are not camping here." He turned, and something in his face finally dropped. Not the sun's face, the other one, the one he had probably been wearing for months where I couldn't see it. "Oh, relax. There's a feed site close by," I said. "Or a kill. We leave. Now." That's when he swung my backpack off his shoulder and let it fall into the mud. Then he smiled. "Meet Grizzly Bear." For 1 second, I truly thought I had misheard him. He took 3 steps backward toward the truck path. I went for the pack, opened it, and felt my stomach bottom out. No bear spray, no first aid kit, no satellite locator, half the water gone. I looked up. "What are you doing?" He rubbed the side of his jaw, avoiding my eyes for just a beat. Then he said the sentence I still hear in my sleep sometimes. "Nobody believes you need help until you look unsafe." I must have stared at him too long, because he went cold. "You should have signed the papers, Dad." "What papers?" "The sale, the transfer, any of them. Do you know what that land is worth? Do you know what you're sitting on because you like playing mountain man in a museum?" My mouth went dry. He kept talking, and every word made him less familiar. "You think this place is memory. It's land, it's access, it's a road line, it's leverage. Todd can't close without your parcel, and if the court sees you're not capable of managing yourself, this gets solved." Court. Not a prank, not a tantrum, a plan. I took 1 step toward him. He flinched, then covered it with a laugh that sounded wrong in the trees. "Don't look at me like that. I'm not killing you. Follow the creek south, you'll hit Service Road by morning if you still know how. But if you spend one freezing night out here and come back shaking, maybe for once you'll stop acting like we're the problem." Then he pointed toward the carcass with 2 fingers and said, almost playfully, "Try not to bleed." My legs went weak so fast I bit my tongue. I tasted metal, but my thumb was already pressed against the recorder in my pocket. Luke turned and walked away. I followed him 10 yards. Then 20, because some part of me still believed if I got close enough, I could shame him back into being a son. He got into the truck instead. Gravel spit from the tires. The engine noise faded through the trees, then disappeared. And suddenly, the forest got huge. When a person betrays you in a house, there are walls to absorb it. A table, a doorway, a ceiling fan turning above the argument. In the woods, there is only air and your own body, and the sound your breathing makes when panic realizes it has room. I stood there listening. Wind through the spruce. Flies at the carcass. A branch creaking somewhere uphill. Then, farther off, the rough coughing grunt of something large that didn't care I was human. What happened next made it worse. I checked my pack again, slower this time. Luke had left me 1 bottle of water, a cheap poncho, a flashlight with weak batteries, 2 granola bars, and a wool cap that wasn't mine. He had taken my pills too. Blood pressure medication, spare inhaler, the little blister pack I kept for my bad knee after long climbs. He hadn't just wanted me frightened. He had calculated what frightened might do to a man my age by dawn. For about 30 seconds, I let myself hate him without editing it. Then, I stopped, because rage burns oxygen, and I needed everything my body had. I moved away from the carcass first. Wide circle, downwind, slow steps to keep from snapping brush. Rose used to say, I got calmer when things got worse. It wasn't calm, not really. It was that old workingman habit of putting feeling behind the next task. Find water, find direction, stay alive long enough to understand. The compass needle quivered, then settled. South. I took south. The ground dropped into a tangle of deadfall and slick stone. Twilight thickened fast beneath the trees. Once I slipped and drove my shin into a log, so hard I saw white sparks. Another time, I caught myself against a trunk and smelled the pitch on my palm, bright and raw. About an hour in, I found the creek Luke had mentioned. Not out of mercy, out of confidence. He had always believed if he gave me one thread, I'd be too grateful to notice the noose tied to it. I knelt at the bank and drank with both hands. The water was snow-melt cold enough to hurt my teeth. When I splashed my face, I saw it trembling in the reflection and had to look away. Dark settled hard after that. I couldn't risk hiking fast in full night, not with a knee like mine and no proper light, so I found a wedge between two boulders above the creek and pulled the poncho around my shoulders. The rock smelled damp and old. Pine needles pressed through my jeans. Every sound was bigger in the dark. Water over stone, wings. Once, the clean crack of something stepping on a dead branch nearby. I wrapped one hand around Rose's compass and remembered the night she gave it to me. We were 40 and broke and laughing in a motel with curtains that didn't close. She handed me that little box and said, "I'm not marrying a man who gets lost and refuses to admit it." Then she kissed me before I could answer. That memory should have comforted me. Instead, it hollowed me out, because the woman who knew me best was gone, and the boy we made had just used everything I taught him about the woods to stage my ruin. Sometime after midnight, sleet started ticking through the branches. I knew if I stayed there till morning, the cold would stiffen my knee and slow me down. So I moved again, following the creek in intervals, resting when the leg locked, checking the compass by flashlight every few minutes. The recorder in my pocket felt heavier than metal. It felt like a pulse. I still didn't know how far Luke had gone. I found out just before dawn. The creek bent west around a low ridge, and through the trees I saw a square shape against the paling sky. For a second I thought it was another rock face. Then I recognized the silhouette of an old fire lookout tower, one of the decommissioned ones the Forest Service used for storage now and then. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because if I didn't, I might have laid down. The stairs up were rimed with ice. My knee screamed on every step. At the top, the door was chained but not locked. Inside was a propane heater, dust, a folding cot, and a woman in a Green Ranger jacket pouring coffee from a steel thermos into a paper cup. She spun so fast, coffee sloshed over her hand. Jesus! I must have looked feral, because she backed up before she saw the shape of me properly. "I need a radio," I said, and then my legs gave way for the second time that night. Her name was Tess. She got me inside, wrapped me in an old wool blanket, and radioed down to a deputy station. She also looked in my eyes longer than most people do when they're deciding whether you're injured, drunk, confused, or lying. I told her my name, my address, the year Rose died, the name of the creek, the approximate distance from the service road. Every answer came clean. That mattered later. About 40 minutes after sunrise, a county deputy named Ramirez reached the tower on an ATV. He brought heat packs, more coffee, and the expression of a man trying not to show surprise at finding someone exactly where they said they'd be. He took my statement in notes first. Then he asked, "Did your son report you missing around 6 last night?" I looked up at him. "He reported me missing?" Ramirez hesitated. He said you became disoriented during a hike, argued with him, then wandered off. Said he searched until dark. I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Did he mention the part where he took my gear and left me near a fresh kill?" Ramirez's pen stopped. Tess looked from him to me, then back again. And then Ramirez said the sentence that turned suspicion into fact. He also asked dispatch how quickly family can initiate an emergency guardianship hold after a dementia incident. I stared at him, asked when? He checked his pad. First call came in at 5:47 p.m. But county clerk timestamp on the petition request your son's attorney emailed over was 4:12. It is a strange thing to feel your heart break after a night like that. You would think it had done all the breaking it could, but hearing those numbers, he filed before he reported me, did something different. It took the last excuse out behind the barn and shot it. The camping trip wasn't the betrayal. It was the evidence collection phase. They had already decided who I was going to be on paper. Confused, unsafe, unreliable. One frightened old man, stumbling out of the trees after a cold night, would make their case look responsible instead of predatory. That was the mystery solved. The ribbon, the intake call, the questions about my deed, the rehearsed concern, the perfectly timed father-son weekend. Luke hadn't snapped. He had scheduled me. For a while I couldn't speak. I just sat there with the blanket around my shoulders and watched steam rise from the coffee cup in my hands. Then I said, very quietly, "I have a recording." Ramirez looked at me hard. I took the recorder from my pocket and held it out. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't? At the clinic in town, they checked my knee, my blood pressure, and the small tear on my shin. Nothing fatal, nothing dramatic, not enough damage for the pain I felt. That seemed fitting. Luke arrived before they discharged me. He came in carrying a bag from a pharmacy and wearing the face of a grieving son in a commercial for life insurance. Hair mussed just enough, voice lowered, eyes wet but not swollen. "Dad," he said, like he had spent the night praying. "Thank God." I saw the nurse glance at him and soften. That almost impressed me. He reached for my shoulder. I let him touch it for 1 second, then looked at his hand until he took it away. "You left me there." His eyes flicked to the nurse and back to me. "You were confused." The nerve of that sentence nearly made me laugh. I was clear enough to know an elk carcass from a campsite. He leaned in closer, keeping his voice tender for the audience. "Please don't do this here." There it was, not denial, management. He still thought he could steer the room. He didn't know Ramirez had the recorder. He didn't know the petition timestamp had already been copied. He didn't know Tess had marked the exact coordinates where I was found, and the route down to the service road Luke said he had searched. He also didn't know I was done protecting him from the consequences of his own character. But I didn't show him any of that. Instead, I looked tired, hurt, slower than I was. And when he said, "Maybe we should take a pause from the cabin until everything settles," I nodded once and said, "Maybe you're right." The relief that flashed across his face lasted less than a second. It was enough. When Ramirez drove me home, the cabin door was unlocked. Not open, unlocked. That detail matters. People who search your house without permission always tell themselves it wasn't really breaking in if they didn't have to force it. Inside, the place looked almost normal unless you knew where things belonged. The hall desk drawer hung crooked. Rose's recipe tin sat open on the floor with old index cards bent at the corners. The picture frame from our 20th anniversary lay face down on the rug. In my bedroom closet, the lockbox shelf was empty except for dust outlines. Luke had gone looking for the deed. I stood in the middle of the room listening to the grandfather clock tick in the corner and felt something new settle inside me. Not anger. Decision? My attorney was a woman named Miriam Cole, the daughter of a man I'd once worked beside wiring grain elevators. She was precise in a way that made liars uncomfortable. By noon she had copies of the guardianship filing, the land option agreement with Alder Ridge Development, and the side letter Luke had signed, promising him a consulting fee when the east access road closed through my parcel. 6%. Enough money to solve the cash flow strain he had mentioned 3 times that spring. Erica's taste for imported stone and curated light fixtures finally had a number attached to it. Miriam also found something uglier. Luke had attached old medical paperwork from 2 years earlier when I fainted after a gallbladder surgery complication. He had taken a temporary post-op confusion note, stripped it of context, and packaged it like a pattern. "This is attempted coercive guardianship," she said, tapping the file. "And if the recording is what you say it is, he may have crossed into criminal territory." May have? That phrase irritated me. Not because she was wrong. Because fathers spend years calling monstrous things by softer names until the softer names become shelter. That evening, Luke called. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. His voice came smooth. "How are you feeling?" "Sore." "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe we should all sit down Saturday. Me, Erica, maybe Todd from Alder Ridge, just to talk options. No pressure." No pressure. Some people will put a knife on the table and call it a conversation piece. I looked out my kitchen window at the blueberry fence with the orange ribbon still tied there, bright against the gray afternoon. Then I said, "All right." He was silent for half a beat too long. "Really?" "Yes," I said. "Come to the cabin, noon." After I hung up, Miriam looked at me across the table. "You're certain?" I put Rose's compass down between us. "He wanted me frightened and alone when he thought I was weak," I said. He can hear me clearly in my own house. Saturday came with low clouds and the smell of rain in the dirt road. I made coffee before dawn and took out Rose's blue enamel plates, the ones Erica once called quaintly rough. I set 5 places at the table, not because I meant to host them, because I wanted every sound that afternoon, the cutlery, the chairs, the cups touching wood, to happen in a room built by my own hands. At 11:30, Ramirez parked down by the road bend, where the cottonwoods hid the cruiser from the porch. Miriam arrived 10 minutes later. She stayed in the spare room with the door cracked, file in hand, while I sat alone at the table and waited. Luke came first. Crisp navy sweater, groomed stubble, that expensive watch I had once admired when he said he got a deal through a client. Erica was with him, in camel wool and pearl earrings, carrying a leather folder and the smell of perfume that always reminded me of department stores and money spent for witnesses. Behind them came Todd Mercer from Alder Ridge. Broad smile, polished boots, salesman's posture. And last was a notary public named Linda, a woman I recognized from the bank, who looked uneasy before she even stepped inside. The room changed when they entered. Not because they were loud, because greed has a way of crowding the air. Erica glanced around, as if evaluating whether the curtains still offended her. Luke kissed my head, like I was already in a hospital bed. Dad, I didn't stand. Todd extended a hand. Henry, good to finally sit down properly. Beautiful property. Funny, I said. That word keeps coming up. They settled in. Papers came out. Coffee got poured. Erica declined cream. Linda kept smoothing the edge of her notary's stamp pouch like she wished she were somewhere else. Luke started with concern. We all had a scare, he said. No one wants to overreact, but after what happened, it would be irresponsible not to make a plan. What happened? I asked. He blinked, then gave a small, sad smile. The one you use for children and difficult patients. You got turned around. No, I said. What happened? Erica cut in gently. Henry, this doesn't need to become adversarial. Adversarial. I looked at her, then at the blue plate in front of her, then back again. You came to my house with paperwork after your husband left me overnight in Grizzly country, I said. I think adversarial got here first. Todd cleared his throat. Maybe we focus on solutions. There it was again. Solutions. Best. Practical. Concern. Every ugly act dressed up for church. Luke opened the leather folder and slid papers across the table. At the top was a temporary care plan, then a voluntary transfer review, then a property management authorization, all different doors to the same room. If you sign these, he said, we can pause the court stuff, keep this private, and get the land issue handled cleanly. The land issue. Not my safety, not my trust. The land. I let the silence sit until it made Linda the notary look at her shoes. Then I asked the only question that mattered. When did you file the guardianship request? Luke's jaw tightened. Erica answered instead. The timing is being taken out of context. That wasn't my question. Luke set both palms flat on the table. Dad, you are proving the point right now. You fixate, you escalate. We were trying to prevent a tragedy. I nodded, slowly, by leaving me beside a carcass. He leaned back and gave a little breath through his nose, irritated now. The performance was slipping. I did not leave you beside a carcass. You wandered off after you got agitated because I mentioned the sale. Todd shifted in his chair. Linda looked up for the first time. I said, so that's your story. It's the truth. I reached into my pocket and set the recorder on the table. The room went still. Luke's eyes locked onto it first, not confused, recognizing. And that, more than anything, told everyone there exactly who he was. I'm old, I said. Not stupid. Then I pressed play. Static crackled. Wind brushed the mic. Our footsteps on mud. My own voice saying, we are not camping here. Then Luke's voice, clean as glass. Meet Grizzly Bear. A scrape. My zipper opening. My voice, what are you doing? Then his answer, every word sharp enough to cut skin. Nobody believes you need help until you look unsafe. On the recording, I asked, what papers? And Luke, my son, the boy I once carried sleeping from truck to bed with his head on my shoulder, said, You should have signed the sale, the transfer, any of them. Todd can't close without your parcel, and if the court sees you're not capable of managing yourself, this gets solved. No one in that room moved. The clock in the corner ticked once, twice. Then came the line that ended him. I'm not killing you. Follow the creek south, but if you spend one freezing night out here and come back shaking, maybe for once you'll stop acting like we're the problem. The recording clicked off. For a second, all I heard was Erica breathing. Luke lurched forward. That's edited. The spare room door opened. Miriam stepped out, holding the clerk's certified copies. No, she said. It's preserved, duplicated, and already in county hands. Luke stood up so fast, his chair slammed backward into the wall. You set me up. I almost smiled at that. Set him up. As if truth appearing at the wrong time was some kind of trap. Miriam laid the papers on the table one by one like cards in a game he didn't understand, he'd already lost. Guardianship petition initiated at 4:12 p.m. Missing person report placed at 5:47. Land option agreement conditioned on this parcel. Side compensation letter to Luke Bell. And evidence of unlawful entry into Henry Bell's residence after the incident. Todd's face drained of color. He looked at Luke, then at Erica. You told me this was a family consensus. Erica snapped toward him. Don't you dare act shocked. Your people were circling this property for months. Todd raised both hands. We were negotiating a purchase, not a crime. Crime? Luke barked. Oh, now everybody wants to get precious. There it was. The last mask coming off. He turned to me, and all the careful concern disappeared. You want the truth? He said. Fine. You made yourself impossible. That cabin is worth more than everything you ever earned, and you were going to die clutching it out of sentiment while the rest of us cleaned up the mess. Do you know what it's like watching you live alone in this shrine, acting like grief makes you noble? That landed harder than it should have. Not because it was true, because it told me he had been resenting my love for Rose, as if it were a luxury I denied him. I stood then, slowly, my knee ached, my hands were steady. This shrine, I said, is the house your mother built when she was dying and still making room for you. The mess, Luke, is what you made of yourself inside it. He actually laughed, but it was breaking at the edges now. Oh, don't do that. Don't turn Mom into a witness for you. I don't need to, I said. You already witnessed yourself. Erica was crying then, but not from remorse, from collapse, from the terrible inconvenience of a plan failing in daylight. Linda the notary pushed her chair back. I'm leaving, she said, voice thin. I want it on record I did not notarize anything. Sit down, Luke snapped. She flinched. And that was the moment the front door opened. Ramirez stepped in with another deputy behind him. No one announced them. No dramatic pounding. Just the quiet arrival of consequence. Luke turned and actually looked offended. What is this? Ramirez's expression didn't change. Mr. Bell, based on the statement, the recording, the filing timeline, and additional evidence gathered this morning, you're being detained pending charges related to elder endangerment, false reporting, and unlawful entry. Erica made a choking sound. Luke looked at Todd, at Erica, at me. He seemed to be searching for the old arrangement, the one where somebody else cleaned it up, explained it better, softened the edges of what he had done. Nobody moved for him. You called the cops on your own son? He said. I looked at him across Rose's table, at the boy I had raised, and the man who had replaced him. No, I said. You did that when you left me there. He surged once, not toward me, just outward, the way trapped men do when their body finally understands what their mouth hasn't accepted. The deputy caught his arm. Todd backed toward the wall. Erica started saying Luke's name over and over in a voice so small it barely sounded like hers. And through all of it, I felt something I had not expected. Not triumph, relief, because the worst thing was over. The lie had finally run out of room. They walked Luke out through the front door he had once run through at age 11, wearing a red raincoat and carrying a frog in both hands. I remembered that so vividly, it hurt. Rose had stood right where Ramirez was standing now, laughing and pretending to be horrified, while Luke begged to keep it in the bathtub overnight. Memory is merciless like that. It refuses to protect the present from the past. Erica stayed behind after the cruiser pulled away. Her mascara had bled into the corners of her eyes. She looked older, not sadder, just stripped of arrangement. "I didn't think he'd actually leave you all night," she said. It was the closest thing to honesty she had offered me in years. I believed her. I also believed she would have signed every paper. "Take your folder," I said. She stared at me. "That's all you have to say?" I looked at the orange survey ribbon moving outside the window. "Yes." She gathered the papers with trembling hands. At the door, she paused. He was under pressure. The old excuse, the family heirloom. This time, I didn't take it. "So was your mother-in-law," I said. "She built this place while poison dripped into her veins." Pressure doesn't make a person cruel. It reveals whether cruelty was useful to them all along. She left without another word. Rain came an hour later. Hard, clean rain. It tapped the roof, ran off the porch edge, darkened the steps. Luke had just gone down in handcuffs. Todd's business card lay forgotten near the sugar bowl. I picked it up, tore it in half, and dropped it in the stove. The aftermath moved slower than the climax always does. That's how life works. The explosion is loud. The truth after it travels by envelope, hearing date, voicemail, lawyer's bill, the changed way people say your name in town. Luke was charged. His company suspended him within 48 hours, then cut ties before the week was over. Alder Ridge publicly withdrew interest in the parcel, and privately begged Miriam to make sure their names stayed as far from the criminal complaint as possible. Erica moved out of the white stone house by Christmas. Whether that was loyalty ending or strategy shifting, I didn't ask. There was a hearing a month later. This time, I wasn't the one being evaluated. The guardianship petition was dismissed with prejudice. The judge used the word exploitative. I appreciated that. It was neat and legal, and still somehow insufficient. I changed more than locks after that. I put the cabin and the east parcel into an irrevocable trust Miriam drew up, so no future signature could be bullied out of me in a hallway or hospital room. After I'm gone, the land won't become a resort road or a luxury nature retreat. It goes to a conservation group and a small outdoor skills program for kids who don't have anyone to teach them how not to panic in the woods. That part mattered to me. I was not going to let the last thing Luke learned from me be how to profit from a map. As for family, people love asking whether I forgave him. No, I understood him better. That's different. Forgiveness without safety is just another door left unlocked. He wrote twice from county jail before the plea deal. Then once from the treatment program, the court ordered as part of sentencing. Each letter sounded like a man negotiating with the image of himself. Too much explanation, too little truth. I read them all the way through. Then I put them in Rose's old recipe tin, not because they belonged there, but because it was the one place in the house that had already survived being rifled through by hungry hands. Spring came late that year. The snow line lingered high on the ridge until May. When the thaw finally settled, I took down the orange survey ribbon from the blueberry fence myself. The fabric had gone brittle from weather. It snapped in my fingers. Then I fixed the third porch board at last. Rose would have laughed at that. Some mornings now, I sit with coffee on the steps and watch the light move across the fence she loved, the one I built when we still believed work could protect a life from ending. The cabin is quieter than it used to be, but it's an honest quiet. No hidden paperwork in leather folders. No concern sharpened into a blade. No voice in the next room pricing grief by the acre. I still carry the brass compass. The engraving on the back has worn smooth where my thumb rubs it. Find your way home. For a while, after the forest, I thought that line was about survival, about roads and bearings and not freezing in the dark. It isn't. It's about learning the difference between the people who walk beside you and the people who study your footsteps so they can leave you behind. Some evenings, when the sky goes copper and the pines turn black against it, I set the compass on the porch rail and watch the needle settle. It doesn't argue. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't care who wants what. It simply points where true north is. These days, that is enough company for me. And for the first time in a very long time, it is also enough family.